There is no lack of content in the world today when it comes to theological education, the preparation of leaders around the world. There is plenty of material out there. The question is whether that material, that content, is really producing transformed, Christ-like leaders for the church around the world today. If we're going to meet the needs of the church and have theological education be centered across the sectors, centered on the church as its core mission and purpose for which it exists, we must be producing people that have transformed lives that lead to transformed churches and cultures and societies all around them. There are thousands of formal theological education programs in the world today, Bible colleges, seminaries, and through ISET and my work with ISET, I know of many of them around the world, and many of them are doing a terrific job with what they're doing, and we just applaud them. We continue to cheer them on. But there are a lot of training programs through the formal sector of training. On the non-formal, the less than formal, maybe church-based training programs, or those that might not lead to a certain accreditation, and they're not quite as formal as a Bible college or seminary. On that level of theological education, there's a good friend of mine, Manfred Cole. Some of you know who Manfred is. Manfred has suggested that there are at least 40,000 non-formal training programs in the world today. Manfred and I have had conversations about this, and it is a good guesstimate. But as we have talked about it further, we believe that it even far exceeds 40,000 non-formal programs in the world today. Whatever the number is, there is no question there is a great abundance of programs, courses, seminars, conference, all these things that are intended to shape future leaders of the church, especially in the global South, in the majority world settings. And that content, the nature of that content varies widely, of course, right? It could be just a weekend conference. It could be a material that focuses in on preaching. It could be a material that focuses in on church leadership. It could be a material that focuses on administration of the church. It could be a youth ministry. I mean, there are all sorts of materials and programs that are out there specifically addressing certain needs and challenges within the churches around the world today. And those are important and valid. But let me just make this comment about this 40,000 or more programs around the world today, whatever that number is. My concern, and even this even applies to some of the formal programs that are out there, my concern is that they are often too Western-driven. They are too much shaped by this West to the rest era of missions. Previously, you've heard me talk about the movement and that the West to the rest era of missions is over. We live in a polycentric, a multiple centers for missions around the world today. And that has direct implications for theological education, where we have programs being birthed and being administered and led in all parts of the world. But even still today, many of these programs are not contextualized. They do not consider what's happening in context. They are simply putting together material that they think is valid and good. And friends, it is. It's great content. I'm not challenging that. But it is not contextualized and useful in the different settings around the world to the extent that these program leaders believe that it is. It is just not having the impact or the effect that they believe it is having in the long term. Previously, you've also heard me talk about this indigenous movement in polycentric missiology, and it applies again to theological education. I know people in India, for instance, that are developing programs that are in Telugu, in the Telugu language and other languages, and the same thing's happening in other parts of the world, where they are saying, we want to develop our own, and there are now, here's what's exciting. Well, now there are people in these settings, Latin America, Africa, and Asia, you are there. You are there doing this work. You are developing programs in your own native language to meet your own localized needs and contexts. And we applaud that. We continue to applaud that. And those that are in the West that are developing programs to the West, you need to be aware of this. And you need to be aware that it's not simply about delivering content. It is about character, relevant character, change, transformation, influence through your programs. And some of these are developed and then delivered online, and that's okay. I mean, we put them up on the internet and we deliver them online, and we think we've met our goal. And that could be your goal. That could be what we're trying to do is just put something on the internet and have it downloaded somewhere in Africa or in Asia or anywhere else, and people are using them, and that could be good. That it could be useful. But here's what I'm also learning as I interact with a lot of leaders around the world, especially in the non-formal side of preparation for church leaders. What they're really asking about is, can we have more facilitators, more mentors, more coaches, people that are actually walking with the students, the people that are downloading this material, people that are looking at the content? How is it that they have someone walking alongside of them that are helping them understand at a deeper level what this content might mean for them, for their church and their society, their friends, their colleagues, their families? How is it that this is going to really be applied within their context and their settings? And that is a tremendous need nowadays. Here's something else I'm picking up on. As I said earlier, there's not a lack of training materials and content, but I'm also finding this. Some will lead weekend workshops or weekend conferences or seminars, and they will come back or they will go somewhere else and they'll say, we just trained 500 pastors or 500 church leaders or 1,000 youth leaders over the course of a weekend. Well, of course, that begs the question, right? What does it mean to be trained? What does a trained leader look like? What does a trained youth leader look like today in the church around the world? And that's a question we could address in other videos down the road. But for us, what I'm getting to is this. What I've discovered is that there'll be these short-term workshops or seminars, conferences, like I said a moment ago. But guess what? When that is over and that weekend is completed, the next weekend there's another conference. Or maybe 2 weeks down the road, there's yet another conference or workshop or seminar. Friends, again, there's not a lack of content being delivered. And how much of what they might have learned in that first conference sticks with them and really helps them to think differently about their lives, themselves, and their church and society, where they serve. Because by the time they get to the second or third or 10th conference or workshop, are they really still applying what they learned during the first one? And this is a practical challenge that I find in theological education and training programs around the world today. And so what I'm getting at here is that we don't want just to equip people. We want them to be full. We want them to be engulfed with not just wisdom and knowledge and understanding, but life change and character, hearts that are really committed to Christ and following him well along the way. We're talking about transformational impact, aren't we? That's what we're really trying to focus in on. Previously, you've heard me mention the I Set Manifesto and this global, rich declaration. It's about 20 pages long and wonderful global document about theological education. But it also touches character as well. It actually mentions character over a dozen times in that document. And I would encourage you to take a look at that at some point in time. But here's what it says about character in one of the parts of the manifesto. It says, theological education is called and committed to facilitating integrative learning processes that include action and reflection, individuality and community, rationality and spirituality, knowledge and character, wisdom and innovation, educating the entire person. What a great statement. Isn't that fabulous to think about that? How is it that we can educate the entire person? Innovation, character, spirituality, community, reflection. We have to be moving in this direction, because unless we do, then we are having a minimal, if any, generational impact in the church today around the world. We're delivering great stuff. We have great content. We have great programs. We have got great workshops and seminars. But to what extent are we educating the entire person, as the manifesto mentions a moment ago? And so I also ask the question, and when I meet with especially non-formal leaders, and this is they're doing great work all over the world, but as I ask them the question, how are you measuring, how are you assessing progress? How are you assessing that you're actually doing what you think you're doing? A large majority of them, 90% or more, do not have a mechanism in place on how to do that. And I'm not talking about accreditation. I'm not talking about validation. I'm not talking about all that. I'm talking about just purely assessing how is it that we know that we're having character, life change in our students and in our graduates, especially at the non-formal level. There's a ministry called Reforma. Reforma has been developed and shaped over the last few years. Reforma focuses in mostly on pastoral leader development, assessment, validation, perhaps you could use that word. But in essence, what they've done over the years is they've developed 37 outcomes that specifically are intended to measure character change, but also learning and all sorts of things for pastors around the world. Let me just read to you two examples of how they are helping programs around the world measure character. So for them, if you're going to have a certificate from Reforma, you've got to meet these two among 37 outcomes that they require. This is one. It says, how is it that the student can bear the fruit of the Spirit in all areas of life and practice humility, integrity, and simplicity? It's a simple way of trying to measure impact. Identify is another. Identify and train at least 3 others to serve in some form of church ministry. There's the idea of continuity, right? Or the idea of generational impact. How is it that we're doing that? And this specifically says, can you identify and train 3 others within your church? In the end, we are asking whether we are really doing what we think we're doing. Is it really creating the transformational impact that the church really not just needs, but if we look at what the church is called to do by our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, through the Scriptures, how is it that we're equipping the church to serve in its mission around the world? The church growth demand, in part, has led us to develop all these programs. There's a massive, and I've shared this previously as well, we all know there's a massive movement around the world, especially the Global South, in church growth. And so, hence, we figure, well, we need more programs, and there's some truth to that, and that's good. But again, I have to ask the question, what is the transformational life change in the graduates from those programs? Otherwise, we're really not moving the needle in the church around the world. As you think about your programs, as you think about whether it be formal, non-formal, but as you think about especially that area of character, life change, not just content delivery, not just content dumping, but character change within your students and those that you graduate and move on to serve churches and serve societies in different ways, many different ways. How is it that you are assessing some of that? And I know it's not easy to do. Assessing spiritual growth and character change is one of the hardest things to measure, and I get that. But that doesn't mean we stop trying to assess it. We must assess that. And also, here's another question. How is it that your graduates, those that are in your programs, how is it that they are trained on how to invest in others? Because it is not enough to train those that we graduate. They need to become trainers of trainers. They need to become people that are intent on developing their own future leaders in the church. And again, even for them, it is not just about them delivering the content that you gave them, but how is that they are helping the leaders that they're training, the future leaders that they're training, also have this character change that is beyond simply the content delivered. As we think about this and as you reflect on this, keep asking those kind of questions. And how is it that you could move closer, move the needle somehow, even within your programs, to better assess that you are not simply delivering content, but you are intent, are having character change that leads to generational impact. And as you continue to do what I'm suggesting you do, asking you to do, as you do so, continue also to join us as we reimagine theological education together.